The dining room smelled of rosemary and roasted potatoes, a familiar Sunday ritual in the Carter household. The long oak table, polished to a mirror shine, was set with Mom's best china, the kind she only used for these weekly gatherings. I sat near the head, picking at the edge of my napkin, my stomach nodding despite the warm, savory aromas. My family was a tableau of forced normalcy, Dad carving the roast, Mom fussing over the gravy, my younger sister Ellie scrolling on her phone, and Grandpa, his weathered hands folded, staring at the table like he was reading secrets in the wood grain. I was 26, back home in Maplewood after a year in Chicago, where I'd tried, and failed, to make it as a freelance graphic designer. The city had chewed me up, spit me out, and sent me crawling back to my parents' split level with a duffel bag and a bruised ego. Sunday dinners were Mom's way of pretending everything was fine, that I wasn't a failure, that our family was still the picture-perfect unit she'd always wanted. But tonight, something felt off. Grandpa hadn't said much since I'd arrived, which was unusual. He was the storyteller, the one who'd regale us with tales of his Navy days or the time he met Elvis at a gas station in '56. Tonight, he was quiet, his eyes darting to me every few minutes. "Jake, pass the peas," Dad said, his voice cutting through the clink of silverware. I slid the bowl across, avoiding Grandpa's gaze. Ellie, 18 and perpetually distracted, didn't notice the tension. She was texting under the table, her thumbs flying. Mom caught her and gave her that look, the one that could silence a room. "Ellie, phone away. This is family time." Ellie rolled her eyes but complied, stuffing her phone into her jeans. "Fine. Can we eat now? I've got homework." "Homework on a Sunday?" Dad raised an eyebrow, slicing into the roast. "What's the subject?" "Calculus," Ellie muttered, clearly lying. Mom didn't press, though. She was too busy rearranging the centerpiece, a cluster of autumn leaves and candles she'd spent an hour perfecting. I tried to focus on the food, but Grandpa's silence was deafening. He was 82, sharp as ever despite the cane he leaned on, and his presence always carried weight. He'd raised Mom after her parents died young, and his word was law in our family. When he spoke, we listened. So when he didn't speak, it felt like the prelude to a storm. "Jake," Mom said, breaking my thoughts. "How's the job hunt going? Any leads?" I forced a smile. "A few. I've got an interview tomorrow. Remote work, designing for a startup." "That's great, honey." Mom's enthusiasm was painfully optimistic. "You'll be back on your feet in no time." Dad nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Chicago was a rough go, but you're young. Plenty of time to figure it out." I nodded, my throat tight. The truth was, the interview was a long shot, and I'd spent most of the week refreshing job boards and dodging calls from my old landlord about unpaid rent. I didn't want to admit I was drowning, not here, not now. Then Grandpa spoke, his voice low and gravelly, like he was pulling the words from somewhere deep. "I saw you last night." The room froze. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, pea spilling onto the table. Ellie looked up, confused. Mom's smile faltered, her hand hovering over the gravy boat. Dad kept chewing, oblivious for a moment, but even he paused when he saw my face. I stared at Grandpa, his blue eyes piercing mine. His expression wasn't angry or accusing, just knowing. My heart pounded. Last night, I'd been out late, long after I'd told Mom I was just grabbing a coffee with an old high school friend. The truth was messy, and Grandpa's words felt like a spotlight on my lies. What?" I stammered, my voice barely audible. "You heard me," Grandpa said, leaning back in his chair. His hands trembled slightly, but his gaze didn't waver. "I saw you, Jake. Down by the old mill." The old mill. My stomach dropped. The abandoned textile mill on the edge of town, a crumbling relic where kids used to sneak beers and spray paint their names. I hadn't been there since high school, except last night. But how could Grandpa know? He was old, half blind at night, and lived 3 miles away. There was no way he'd been out there at 2 a.m. Dad, Mom said, her voice sharp, what are you talking about? Jake was home by 10. Grandpa didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me, unblinking. Was he? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind raced, replaying last night, the dark, the cold, the whispered conversation I'd had with someone I shouldn't have been with. Someone who could ruin everything if my family found out. I'd been careful, or so I thought. No one was supposed to know. Grandpa, I said, forcing a laugh, you must have seen someone else. I was at the diner with Mike. Mike, Grandpa repeated, his tone flat. Funny. Didn't look like Mike to me. Ellie leaned forward, sensing gossip. Wait, what's going on? Jake, what's he talking about? Nothing, I snapped, too quickly. Mom's eyes narrowed, and Dad finally put down his fork, his face a mix of confusion and concern. Dad, stop it, Mom said, her voice trembling now. You're scaring him. You're scaring all of us. But Grandpa didn't stop. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I know what I saw, Jake. And you'd better come clean before someone else does. The room spun. My palms were sweaty, my napkin crumpled in my fist. I wanted to run, to bolt from the table and never look back. But I was trapped, pinned by Grandpa's words and the weight of my own guilt. What had he seen? And how? Mom stood, her chair scraping against the floor. That's enough, she said, her voice cracking. Dad, you're not making sense. Jake, tell him he's mistaken. I opened my mouth, but the lie wouldn't come. Not this time. Grandpa's eyes held me, and I felt like he could see every secret I'd ever buried. Then Mom turned to me, her face pale, her hands shaking as she gripped the table. Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? The rest of dinner was a blur. Mom's question hung in the air, unanswered, as Ellie peppered me with questions I dodged. Dad tried to steer the conversation back to normalcy, talking about the weather, but even he couldn't hide his unease. Grandpa didn't say another word, just ate his meal with a calm that made my skin crawl. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and retreated to my childhood bedroom, where I lay awake, replaying last night. I'd gone to the mill to meet Sarah. Sarah, my ex from college, who I hadn't seen in years until she texted me out of the blue last week. She was married now, unhappily, and her messages had been a lifeline in my spiraling life. Last night, we'd met in secret, not to rekindle anything but to talk about her failing marriage, my failing career, the way life had a knack for breaking us both. It was innocent, mostly. A few beers, a shared cigarette, her head on my shoulder as we sat on the mill's rusted steps. But it was also reckless. If her husband found out, or if my family got the wrong idea, it could blow up everything. How had Grandpa known? Had he followed me? Had someone else seen us and told him? The mill was on the outskirts, surrounded by woods, not exactly a hotspot for late-night strolls. And Grandpa wasn't the type to wander at night, not with his bad hip and his strict 9 p.m. bedtime. The next morning, I drove to his house, a small bungalow cluttered with Navy memorabilia and faded photos. He was in his armchair, reading the paper, his cane propped against the wall. I didn't waste time with small talk. Grandpa, I said, sitting across from him, what did you see last night? He folded the paper slowly, his hands deliberate. You tell me, Jake. I told you. I was with Mike. He snorted, a sound that carried years of skepticism. Don't lie to me, boy. I've known you since you were in diapers. You were at the mill, and you weren't alone. My throat tightened. How do you know that? He leaned forward, his voice low. I have my ways. You think you're the only one with secrets? I stared, my mind racing. Grandpa wasn't tech-savvy, no smartphone, no social media. He couldn't have tracked me. Had he been there? Had he heard us? Sarah had mentioned her husband was suspicious, but she swore he didn't know about our meeting. Could Grandpa be protecting someone, or something else? Grandpa, please, I said, my voice breaking. If you know something, just tell me. I can't fix this if I don't know what's going on. He studied me, his eyes softening for a moment before hardening again. You want to fix it? Start by being honest. With me, with your mother. She deserves better than your lies. I left his house more confused than ever. He hadn't given me answers, only more questions. That night, I texted Sarah, asking if she'd told anyone about our meeting. Her reply was instant, no one knows. Why? I didn't respond. I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa's words were a warning, not just about last night but about something bigger, something I didn't yet understand. Over the next week, the tension in the house grew. Mom watched me like I was a stranger, her usual warmth replaced by quiet suspicion. Dad tried to mediate, but his questions, "What's going on with you, Jake?" only made me retreat further. Ellie, sensing drama, kept prying, but I shut her down. I couldn't tell them about Sarah, not without admitting I'd been sneaking around, meeting a married woman in the dead of night. I threw myself into the job interview, hoping work would distract me. It went better than expected, a small startup designing app interfaces, remote but stable. They offered me the job on the spot, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. But when I told Mom, her smile was forced, her eyes searching mine for something she wasn't saying. Sunday dinner loomed again, and I dreaded it. I considered skipping, but Mom insisted. "We're family," she said, her voice tight. "We don't run from each other." The table was set the same, china, candles, the works, but the air was heavier. Grandpa was there, his expression unreadable. Ellie was quieter, sensing the shift. Dad tried to keep things light, talking about his golf game, but no one was listening. Halfway through the meal, Grandpa spoke again. "Jake," he said, his voice cutting through the clatter of forks. "You gonna tell them, or am I?" My heart stopped. Mom's fork clattered to her plate. Dad looked between us, confused. Ellie's eyes widened, her phone forgotten. "Tell us what?" Mom asked, her voice barely a whisper. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Grandpa's stare was relentless, and I knew this was it, the moment everything would unravel. But what did he know? And why was he so sure I'd been caught? Subscribe channel friends to get more stories. I couldn't breathe. Grandpa's words hung in the air like smoke, curling around the dining room and choking me. Mom's eyes were wide, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if she could anchor herself to something solid. Dad's fork hovered midair, his brow furrowed. Ellie, for once, was silent, her usual smirk replaced by a mix of curiosity and dread. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never face the consequences of whatever Grandpa was about to reveal. "Tell us what?" Mom repeated, her voice sharper now, edged with fear. "Jake, what's he talking about?" I looked at Grandpa, pleading silently for him to stop. His face was stone, his eyes locked on mine. He wasn't angry, not exactly, just resolute, like a man who'd seen too much to let lies fester. I'd always admired his strength, his no-nonsense way of cutting through the noise. Now, I hated it. "I don't know what he means," I said, my voice cracking. It was a weak lie, and I saw Mom flinch, her trust in me fraying. "Grandpa, you're confused." "I wasn't at the mill. I was with Mike." Grandpa leaned back, crossing his arms. "You keep saying that, Jake. But I know what I saw. And it wasn't Mike." Dad finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Dad, enough. You're upsetting everyone. If you've got something to say, just say it." Grandpa's gaze didn't waver. "I saw Jake at the old mill last Saturday night. 2 in the morning. He wasn't alone. There was a woman with him." The room went silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound whole. Mom's face drained of color. Ellie's mouth fell open, and Dad's fork hit the plate with a clink. I felt like I was falling, the ground slipping out from under me. A woman? Mom whispered, her eyes darting to me. Jake, who was it? I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. I couldn't tell them about Sarah, not now, not like this. She was married, and even though nothing had happened beyond talking, the optics were damning. A late-night meeting at an abandoned mill? No one would believe it was innocent. It's not what you think, I said, my voice hoarse. Grandpa's mistaken. I wasn't there. Then why's he so sure? Ellie piped up, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of drama. Grandpa doesn't just make stuff up. Ellie, stay out of it, I snapped, harsher than I meant. She recoiled, hurt flashing across her face. Mom stood, her chair scraping loudly. Jake, look at me. Her voice trembled, but there was steel beneath it. Were you at the mill? With a woman? I hesitated, and that was my mistake. The pause was louder than any confession. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth. Dad reached for her, but she shook him off. Laura, Dad said softly, let's hear him out. Hear him out? Mom's voice broke. He's lying, Tom. He's been lying to us since he came back. Sneaking out, dodging questions, what else is he hiding? Mom, I'm not, I started, but Grandpa cut me off. Enough, Jake, he said, his voice low but commanding. You want to protect someone, fine. But don't drag your family down with you. Tell the truth, or I will. I stared at him, my heart pounding. How did he know? Had he been there, watching from the shadows? Or had someone tipped him off? The mill was isolated, surrounded by pines and gravel roads, no place an 82-year-old would stumble across by chance. I thought of Sarah, her nervous laughter as we'd sat on the mill steps, the way she'd glanced over her shoulder like she expected to be caught. Had someone followed her? Her husband, maybe? Or was Grandpa bluffing, testing me? I'm not hiding anything, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Grandpa, you're wrong. I don't know what you think you saw, but it wasn't me. He shook his head, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face. You're digging a deeper hole, son. Mom sat back down, her hands trembling. Dad, if you know something, just tell us. Stop this game. Grandpa sighed, his shoulders sagging. For the first time, he looked tired, like the weight of his words was more than he wanted to carry. I didn't want to do this, Laura. But Jake's not giving me a choice. He turned to me, his voice softer now. Last chance, Jake. Tell them who she was. I froze, my mind racing. If I admitted to meeting Sarah, it would spiral, Mom would assume the worst, Dad would lecture me on responsibility, and Ellie would spread it to every cousin in a 10-mile radius. But if I kept lying, Grandpa might reveal something worse. What if he knew more than he was letting on? What if he'd seen something I hadn't? I was alone, I said finally, the lie tasting bitter. I went for a drive, okay? I couldn't sleep. I stopped by the mill to clear my head. No one else was there. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. Alone, he repeated, the word heavy with skepticism. Funny how I saw two shadows, not one. Mom's breath hitched. Dad leaned forward, his voice low. Jake, if there's someone else involved, you need to tell us. Now. I shook my head, my palms sweaty. There's no one. I swear. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom stared at the table, her fingers twisting her napkin. Dad rubbed his temples, like he was trying to ward off a headache. Ellie watched me, her expression unreadable. And Grandpa, he just looked sad, like he'd hoped I'd be better than this. Dinner ended early. Mom cleared the plates in silence, refusing my help. Dad took Grandpa home, and Ellie disappeared to her room, probably texting her friends about the drama. I stayed in the dining room, staring at the empty table, my mind a tangle of fear and questions. How had Grandpa known? And what else did he know? The next few days were unbearable. Mom barely spoke to me, her disappointment a physical presence in the house. Dad tried to bridge the gap, asking vague questions about my late-night drive, but I stuck to my story. Ellie, meanwhile, was relentless, cornering me in the kitchen with a smirk. "So, who's the mystery girl, Jake?" "Spill." "There's no girl," I said, shoving past her to grab a coffee. "Drop it. You're such a bad liar," she said, following me. "Grandpa doesn't make stuff up. If he says he saw you, he saw you." "Then he's seeing things," I snapped. "He's old, Ellie. Maybe his eyes are going." She snorted. "Yeah, right. Grandpa's sharper than you. If he says you were with someone, you were." I ignored her, but her words gnawed at me. Grandpa was sharp, too sharp to mistake a random shadow for me. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them from him. Not yet. So I turned to Sarah. I texted her from a gas station, away from the house's prying ears. "We need to talk." "Did anyone see us at the mill?" Her reply took an hour. "No one knows, I swear." "Why? What's wrong?" "My grandpa saw us." "Or thinks he did. He's telling my family I was with a woman." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, finally, "That's impossible. We were alone." I was careful. "Then how does he know?" I typed, my fingers shaking. "He knew it was the mill. He knew the time." No response. I called her, but it went to voicemail. My stomach churned. Sarah had been paranoid about her husband, Mark, a cop with a temper and a knack for tracking people down. Had he followed her? Had he told Grandpa? But that didn't make sense. Grandpa wasn't close to Mark, and Sarah swore she'd covered her tracks. I drove to the mill that night, needing to see it for myself. The place was as desolate as ever, the brick facade crumbling, the windows boarded up. I parked a half-mile away and walked, my flashlight cutting through the dark. The air was cold, the pines whispering in the wind. I retraced our steps, down the gravel path, past the rusted machinery, to the concrete steps where we'd sat. There was no sign of anyone else, no footprints, no cigarette butts. Just the faint outline of our initials, scratched into the dirt from that night. I was about to leave when I saw it, a glint in the bushes, barely visible in the moonlight. I crouched, my heart racing, and found a small metal object half buried in the leaves. A keychain, old and tarnished, with a Navy insignia. Grandpa's Navy insignia. My blood ran cold. He'd been here. Not just seen me from a distance, but been here, close enough to drop something. I pocketed the keychain, my mind spinning. Why was he here? Was he following me, or was it something else? I confronted Grandpa the next day, the keychain burning a hole in my pocket. He was in his backyard, tending his rose bushes, his hand steady despite his age. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Explain this," I said, holding up the keychain. He glanced at it, his face unreadable. "Where'd you get that?" "You know where." "The mill. I found it last night, right where I was sitting." He set down his clippers, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You went back, huh? Looking for answers?" "Stop dodging," I said, my voice rising. "You were there. You followed me." "Why?" He sighed, leaning on his cane. "I didn't follow you, Jake. I was already there." "What?" I stared, my anger faltering. "What does that mean?" He gestured to the porch. "Sit. This ain't a short story." I followed him, my mind racing. He sat heavily, his eyes distant. "The mill's been a problem for years," he said. "Kids, drugs, trouble. I'd been keeping an eye on it since the sheriff stopped patrolling out there. Old habit from my Navy days, watch the perimeter, keep things safe." I blinked, trying to process. "You're, what, patrolling the mill? At your age?" He chuckled, a dry sound. "Don't underestimate me, boy. I saw you and that girl, clear as day. Didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard enough." You're in over your head, Jake. My face burned. You don't know anything about it. I know she's married, he said, his voice cutting. I know her husband's trouble. And I know you're lying to your family to protect her. I froze, the keychain heavy in my hand. He wasn't bluffing. He'd heard us, Sarah's tears, my promises to keep her secret. But there was something else in his tone, something he wasn't saying. What else do you know? I asked, my voice low. He looked at me, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't name. Enough to know you're not the only one with secrets at that table. Subscribe channel friends. Grandpa's words echoed in my head as I drove home, the keychain still in my pocket like a guilty verdict. You're not the only one with secrets at that table. What did that mean? Was he talking about himself? Mom? Dad? Ellie? The idea that our family, already fraying under the weight of my lies, might be hiding more made my skin crawl. I'd always thought we were open, maybe too open, with Mom's endless questions and Dad's awkward attempts at bonding. But now, every memory felt suspect, every conversation a potential lie. I didn't confront Mom or Dad right away. I needed proof, something to make sense of Grandpa's cryptic warning. Instead, I watched them, searching for cracks in their routines. Mom was quieter than usual, her smiles forced, her eyes lingering on me when she thought I wasn't looking. Dad buried himself in work, coming home late and avoiding the dining room altogether. Ellie was the only one who seemed unchanged, still glued to her phone, but even she was cagey, locking her door at night and whispering on calls I couldn't overhear. I kept texting Sarah, but her replies were sporadic, evasive. Mark's been asking questions, she texted one night. I think he knows I went out. Be careful, Jake. I told her about Grandpa, about the keychain, but she swore no one else had been at the mill. Maybe he's confused, she wrote, but I could hear her fear through the words. Mark was a cop, with access to resources I couldn't imagine. If he suspected Sarah was cheating, he wouldn't stop until he had proof, and I'd be collateral damage. I started digging. First, I checked Grandpa's story. The mill had been a trouble spot, like he'd said, local news archives mentioned vandalism, drug deals, even a few assaults over the years. But the idea of Grandpa patrolling it at night was absurd. He could barely walk without his cane, and his truck hadn't left the driveway in weeks. I called Mike, my alibi, and begged him to back me up if anyone asked. He agreed, but his voice was hesitant. What's going on, man? You sound freaked. Just family stuff, I said, dodging. I couldn't drag him into this, not when I didn't even know what this was. Next, I searched the house. Mom and Dad were at work, Ellie at school, so I had the place to myself. I started in Grandpa's old room, where he'd stayed before moving to his bungalow. It was mostly storage now, filled with boxes of Mom's old crafts and Dad's golf trophies. But in the closet, tucked behind a stack of quilts, I found a locked metal box, the kind Grandpa used for his Navy papers. I didn't have the key, but the lock was old, rusted. With a screwdriver and some guilt, I pried it open. Inside were letters, yellowed and brittle, addressed to Grandpa from someone named Clara. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and the dates went back to the 1970s, when Grandpa was still married to Grandma Rose. My stomach twisted as I read one, dated 1974, I know we shouldn't, but I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me at the mill, same time. The mill. The same place he'd caught me. Had Grandpa been meeting someone there, all those years ago? Was that why he was so sure I was lying, because he'd lived the same secret? I shoved the letters back, my hands shaking. Grandpa had an affair. The man who'd preached honesty, who'd raised Mom to value family above all, had been sneaking around behind Grandma's back. It explained his obsession with the mill, his late-night patrols. But it didn't explain how he'd seen me, or why he was so determined to expose me. I was about to leave when I heard the front door open. I froze, shoving the box back into the closet. Footsteps echoed down the hall, too light to be Dad, too heavy for Ellie. Mom. Jake, she called, her voice sharp. You home? I stepped out, forcing a smile. Yeah, just grabbing some old sketches from my room. She stood in the hallway, her purse still over her shoulder, her eyes searching mine. What were you doing in there? She asked, nodding toward Grandpa's room. My heart skipped. Nothing. Just looking for some art supplies. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way her lips pressed together, the same way they had at dinner. Jake, she said, her voice softer now, I don't know what's going on with you, but I can't keep doing this. The lying, the secrets, it's breaking my heart. Mom, I'm not lying, I said, but the words felt hollow. Grandpa's wrong. I wasn't with anyone. She shook her head, tears welling. I want to believe you. But I know my father. He doesn't accuse without reason. And I know you, Jake. You've been different since you came back. Distant. Scared. I wanted to tell her everything, about Sarah, the mill, the pressure of failing in Chicago. But I couldn't. Not when I didn't know who else was hiding something. I'm fine, I said, hating myself for the lie. Just trust me, okay? She didn't answer, just turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped. I stood there, the weight of the letters and Grandpa's keychain pressing down on me. I needed to talk to Sarah, to figure out if Mark was onto us, if Grandpa was working with someone. But first, I had to face Sunday dinner again. The next dinner was worse. Mom barely looked at me, serving food with mechanical precision. Dad tried to fill the silence with talk of his latest project at work, but his voice was strained. Ellie, sensing the tension, stayed quiet, her phone untouched. Grandpa was late, which wasn't like him. When he finally arrived, leaning heavily on his cane, his face was grim. Sorry, he said, settling into his chair. Had to take care of something. Mom nodded, but her eyes flicked to me, then away. I could feel the unspoken questions piling up, the secrets Grandpa had hinted at threatening to spill. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. Halfway through the meal, Ellie broke the silence. So, Jake, you gonna tell us who the mystery woman is yet? Ellie, Dad warned, but she ignored him. Come on, she said, leaning forward. Grandpa saw you. You can't keep pretending it didn't happen. Enough, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. There's no woman. Grandpa's mistaken. Grandpa chuckled, a low, bitter sound. Mistaken, huh? That's what you're sticking with? I glared at him, my patience fraying. What do you want from me? You keep saying you saw me, but you won't tell me how. Were you there? Did someone tell you? What? He set down his fork, his eyes locking onto mine. You want the truth, Jake? Fine. I wasn't alone that night either. The room went still. Mom's fork froze midair. Dad's jaw tightened. Ellie's eyes widened, her gossip radar pinging. What do you mean? Mom asked, her voice barely audible. Grandpa sighed, his hands folding on the table. I've been watching the mill for years, like I told Jake. But I don't go alone. I've got help. Help? Dad echoed, his brow furrowing. Who? Grandpa hesitated, his eyes flicking to Mom, then back to me. Someone who knows the town better than I do. Someone who saw you, Jake, and told me. My heart pounded. Who? He didn't answer, just shook his head. Doesn't matter. What matters is you're playing with fire, and it's gonna burn more than just you. Mom stood, her chair scraping. Dad, stop it. You're scaring me. Who's helping you? And why are you doing this to Jake? I'm not doing anything to him, Grandpa said, his voice rising. I'm trying to save him. And this family. Save us from what? Dad asked, his tone sharp now. You're talking in circles. Grandpa looked at me, his eyes heavy. From the truth, Tom. The truth we've all been running from. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood, my chair tipping back. I'm done, I said, my voice shaking. You want to play detective, Grandpa? Fine. But leave me out of it. I stormed out, ignoring Mom's calls. I drove to the mill again, my hands gripping the wheel. Grandpa's help could only mean one thing: someone else was watching me that night. Someone who knew Sarah, or Mark, or both. I needed to find them before this blew up in my face. The mill was darker this time, the moon hidden behind clouds. I parked farther away, my flashlight dim to avoid attention. The keychain was still in my pocket, a reminder of Grandpa's presence that night. I didn't know what I was looking for, proof, maybe, or a clue about who Grandpa's help was. But I couldn't sit still, not with my family unraveling and Sarah's silence growing louder. I moved through the woods, my steps quiet on the pine needles. The mill loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the sky. I retraced my path from that night, checking the steps, the bushes, anywhere someone could have hidden. Nothing. Just the same rusted machinery, the same graffiti-covered walls. Then I heard it, a twig snapping behind me. I spun, my flashlight catching a figure in the shadows. My heart stopped. Who's there? I called, my voice shaking. No answer. I stepped forward, the beam trembling in my hand. Show yourself. The figure moved, stepping into the light. It was Mark, Sarah's husband, his face hard, his police uniform catching the glow. In his hand was a flashlight of his own, and a gun. Jake, he said, his voice low, dangerous. We need to talk. I froze, my mind racing. Mark, I don't know what you think, save it, he cut me off, stepping closer. I know you were here with Sarah. Don't lie to me. I swallowed, my mouth dry. It's not what you think. We were just talking. Talking, he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. At 2 a.m, in the middle of nowhere? You think I'm stupid? No, I said quickly. I swear, Mark, it was nothing. She's unhappy, she needed a friend. Shut up, he snapped, raising the gun slightly. I don't care what you call it. You're done, Jake. You and Sarah both. My heart pounded. Did you tell my grandpa? Is that how he knew? Mark's eyes narrowed. Your grandpa? What are you talking about? He saw us, I said, my voice shaking. He told my family I was here with a woman. Someone told him, was it you? Mark laughed, a cold, bitter sound. I didn't tell anyone. I've been watching Sarah for weeks, but I didn't need to snitch to some old man. You're not the only one she's been sneaking around with. My stomach dropped. What? You heard me, he said, stepping closer. Sarah's been playing you, Jake. You're not her only friend. I shook my head, trying to process. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo, Sarah, at a diner, laughing with another man. The timestamp was 2 nights ago, when she'd told me she was staying home. My chest tightened. Who's that? I asked, my voice barely audible. Doesn't matter, Mark said. What matters is you're in my way. And I don't like people in my way. I backed up, my hands raised. Mark, listen, I'll stay away from her. I didn't know, too late, he said, his gun steady. You're gonna tell me everything. And then you're gonna disappear. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the dark. Put the gun down, Mark. I turned, my flashlight catching Grandpa, leaning on his cane, his face grim. Behind him was a woman, Clara, I realized, the name from the letters. She was older, maybe in her 60s, but her eyes were sharp, her stance steady. Grandpa? I stammered. What? Stay back, Jake, he said, his voice calm but firm. Mark, you don't want to do this. Mark's gun wavered, his eyes darting between us. You're in on this too, old man? What is this, a family conspiracy? No conspiracy, Clara said, stepping forward. Just people trying to protect their own. Like you're trying to protect Sarah. Protect her? Mark spat. She's been lying to me for months. Sneaking around, meeting him, he jabbed the gun toward me, and who knows who else. Then deal with her, Grandpa said. Not Jake. He's a kid, caught up in something he doesn't understand. I stared, my mind reeling. Clara was Grandpa's help, the one who'd seen me that night. But why were they here? And how did they know Mark? Jake, Clara said, her voice soft but urgent, go home. Now. I didn't move, my legs rooted to the ground. Mark's gun was still on me, his finger twitching. Grandpa stepped closer, his cane tapping the dirt. Mark, I know you're angry. I've been there. But this isn't the way. Mark's eyes flicked to Grandpa, then back to me. For a moment, I thought he'd shoot. Then he lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping. Get out of here, he said, his voice breaking. All of you. I didn't wait. I ran, my flashlight bouncing, my heart in my throat. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The next morning, I went to Grandpa's house. Clara was there, sitting on the porch, her hands folded. Grandpa was inside, making coffee. I didn't waste time. Who are you? I asked Clara, my voice shaking. And what's going on? She sighed, her eyes tired. I'm an old friend of your grandfather's. We made mistakes, years ago. Met at the mill, like you and Sarah. When he started watching the place again, he asked me to help. I've got a knack for noticing things. You saw me, I said, my voice flat. And you told him? She nodded. I didn't know it was you at first. But when I saw Sarah, I recognized her. Her husband's been causing trouble for years. I didn't want you caught in the middle. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, turning to Grandpa as he stepped onto the porch. He handed me a coffee, his face heavy. Because I wanted you to come clean, Jake. To own your mistakes, not hide from them. Like I didn't, all those years ago. I thought of the letters, the affair. You mean Clara? He nodded, his eyes distant. I hurt your grandmother. Hurt your mother, too, when she found out. I didn't want you making the same mistakes. I sank into a chair, my head spinning. So you let Mom think I was cheating with Sarah? I didn't want to, he said. But you wouldn't talk. And I couldn't let you keep lying. I told them everything then, about Sarah, our talks, her marriage. Grandpa listened, his face softening. Clara added details about Mark, his jealousy, his history of tracking Sarah. They'd been watching the mill to protect the town, but also to protect me, once they realized I was involved. That night, I went home and told Mom the truth. Not everything, just enough. That I'd met a friend, that it was a mistake, that I was sorry for lying. Her tears were painful, but her hug was warm, the first real one in weeks. Dad listened quietly, his hand on my shoulder. Ellie, for once, didn't pry. Grandpa and I talked more over the next week. He told me about Clara, about the mill, about the secrets he'd carried for decades. I told him about Chicago, my fears, my failures. We didn't fix everything, but we started. Sarah left town a month later, her marriage over. Mark didn't come after me, thanks to Grandpa's quiet talk with the sheriff. The mill stayed empty, its secrets buried again. And Sunday dinners, well, they got a little easier, one truth at a time. Thank for watching, like, share and subscribe channel. Goodbye, God bless you all.